So is now the time to buy used or new cars? Well, since post-pandemic, there's been a lot of different changes in the marketplace, and some things have been happening in this last couple of years that have caused some disturbances in the peace, if you will. Now, looking at car lots like this, clearly it looks like there's lots of cars back there, but push come to shove, there really aren't that many. As a matter of fact, a lot of the even mainstream brands are finding themselves having difficulty in fulfilling orders. So the question is, should you settle for new? Should you settle for used? Which is the best approach? Where are you going to get your best bang for buck? Where is the best interest rates, finance rates? And where's the best car that you're probably going to be looking for? The car that you're probably going to want to hold on for a while. Well, remember, there's been a lot of interesting things going on in the industry as a whole. Now, first of all, we have car brands like Toyota just-in-time. So just-in-time delivery means you go into the dealer, you put a deposit of $500, 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years later, you might get your new car. Of course, you do sometimes get subjected to better interest rates when you're buying new from factory. If you have good financing and you actually qualify as what of a upper prime or a premium prime a buyer, then you might actually get a slightly better interest rates. But if you're subprime or you're bottom of the barrel, and unfortunately some of those that are on the other side of the spectrum, you might find yourself with less than favorable rates, up to maybe 9% interest rates, which is clearly a difficult time. And of course, Toyota's not the only one. Obviously, Honda's having some difficulty in filling orders as well. The UAW, we know on the other side of the spectrum, is having no difficulty in filling new orders because they have tons of product on the lots. We have Jeeps and trucks, we have the Stellantis group, we have the Rams selling. There is way too many sitting on the lot. Let's put it that way right now. Jeep and Dodge, Ram have way too many vehicles, and of course you pretty much pick of the litter. So then on the other hand is you buy one and you don't know if you're going to have warranty parts available if something breaks. I mean, it's a Dodge, it's a Ram, there's parts that tend to fail on those quite frequently. You go into the dealership or the network to actually get that part replaced, even if it's under warranty. The parts could be hampered too. So buying a new Dodge, Stellantis, or Ram, or Jeep could be snookered with certain parts. You might find difficulty in getting them. Now, a lot of the dealers have been trying to, stockpile some of that, but the fact is, a lot of these parts for a lot of these vehicles are back ordered, backlogged, and a lot of it has to do with the UAW strike. Of course, now everything's on hold. There's some parts of these organizations that are still putting out products, but a lot of them are basically crippled, and as a result, a lot of these parts are not getting out to the dealer network anymore. That's why just before UAW strike hit, a lot of these manufacturers are stocking up, but there is coming an end to that whole situation. So you could find yourself with a Stellantis, Ram, Jeep product with a part, even in warranty, and you can't get replacement parts for it, and it might just sit at the dealer lot. Same thing goes with Ford. Now, Ford and GM have taken a bit of a beating in this last little bit. The strike talks, UAW's taken a run at them even harder. There's been more plants shut down, and what we're seeing is the head of UAW is basically targeting a lot of these facilities. So again, walking onto a car lot, looking for a new F-150, F-250, you can probably find lots of selection there right now, buying brand new, and there's going to be some incentives. We're starting to see some incentives come back, but the reality is, again, the parts backlog. Are we going to have that? This is a bit of a projection depending on how long this strike goes on for, and the same thing we can say pretty much applies as well to GM and GMC product line of vehicles, Chevy and GM. We're going to see that potential hold up or bottleneck with a lot of the parts, and time will tell, right? Because even under warranty, like I said, even if you don't have to pay a dime, you may have to wait to get your car fixed, just if it means, or your truck, if it means getting a new part from the factory, if for some reason they don't have them on their shelves. And a lot of times these dealers don't. I mean, I don't know, I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a BMW parts counter, and often you have to order it away and say, well, we'll ship it in and it'll be here in a day or 2 days. That's not uncommon, so they're getting it from a common warehouse. But the reality is a lot of those parts are going to start dwindling away with time here, the longer the UAW strike goes on. So you do have options with the Jeep, Stellantis, Ram, F-150, Fords, GMs. There's lots of options to buy right now, new, and there are even some incentives starting to come back. but then you're challenged with the idea of some of the backlog and some of the challenges there as well. Then again, Mazda, Honda, Toyota have some of their own issues, new or used. Well, I've also had conversations with GMs, and I've talked to different salespeople and associates with Toyota products where they're one of the lowest available used car inventories on the planet. Everybody loves Toyota. Well, people that just want a good, practical, reliable car, they tend to gravitate to cars like Toyotas and Hondas because they're no muss, no fuss. The problem with Toyota is anything hybrid, you're going to pay or wait at least, if you're buying new, at least 1.5 to 2 or plus years. If you want, say, a Prius Prime or something like that, or a RAV4, you want something that actually has a hybrid attached to it, you're probably going to find yourself having to wait to get that new vehicle. So you put down your $500, you might have to wait 1.5 years to get that new RAV4 hybrid. So there's a big waiting game. So a lot of Toyota and loyal Toyota customers are finding themselves just going out and saying, you know what, I can't wait for 1.5 or 2 years. This is ludicrous. So what do you have on the lot? Well, lo and behold, did you realize Toyota is struggling right now? They don't have a lot of inventory on the lot either, and neither do some of their competitors. Now, car manufacturers like Toyota, Mazda, and Honda, as I mentioned already, are some of the lowest in the industry to have used inventory on their car lots. For example, most of them are around 39 days of used inventory. That's it. So in other words, you're talking about if they cut the chain off right there, you might actually have only 2 or 3 weeks left of available inventory before they're kind of sold out at current sales rates. And many of the other car manufacturers are finding their lots are full up to over 50 days of available inventory on the used market. So clearly, even the brands like Toyota and Hondas, Mazdas, they're struggling with keeping inventory on the lot. Now, of course, they're there to make money by selling product, but how do you backfill that and get more product in its place? Well, that's the struggle, and the struggle's real. So even existing Toyota customer want to trade up to buy that new Toyota, they're not going to be able to trade that in until their new one shows up a year later. So there's still that lagging and backlog game. And unfortunately, this whole market and this whole industry has flip-flopped 180 degrees since that last PEMIC, what we went through for the last couple of years in 2020 and 21. And then bringing our friends at Cox Automotive into the conversation, they're saying that we're only seeing an industry average of about 2.2 to 2.3 million units available in the market currently today, spread across all available marketplaces. And of course, that just means it's stable, yes, but it's not rising. It's not increasing like a lot of people were hoping it would, that we'd start to see this flood of backlog of used vehicles starting to hit the market, which of course it's all about supply and demand. So as the available vehicles start flooding the market, that means supply goes up, demand goes down. So, and then when demand goes down, prices go down, everybody's happy, especially on the customer side. But unfortunately, it's still stable and it's still holding, and it has held for the last 4 months. So that basically means, as an industry whole, we're seeing is situations where we're not expecting any drastic drops in values and prices of new or used vehicles. And now a lot of people are talking about, well, the used car prices were promising to go down. And actually we did see a little bit of a downtick. So in the early parts of August and leading into that, there was indicators on the wholesale market, which of course we all know wholesale is the start of that trend, and then it follows to the retail market. So what we see in the wholesale market at auctions and so on, and that's where you're changing a lot of those products and the hands are swapping over, or the products are swapping hands, is we would anticipate, or we were seeing a downtick in prices at the wholesale market. But now, unfortunately, we're seeing again at the end of August, as we're rolling into September, we're now seeing that trend start to creep upwards again on the wholesale market, which sadly translates directly to the retail market down the road. Naturally, with that lag, you're talking 6 to 8 weeks. So we're going to start to see that kind of the end of September as we roll, and now into early October, we're going to start to see that lagging effect and kicking in real time. And honestly, I've seen a lot of car manufacturers, a lot of the local dealers still holding with some of their extraordinarily high prices on the used market. And often I found myself going in there and asking a question, like, aren't you guys, maybe getting desperate to sell? And they say, no, we're not. We're really not. Cars are still selling. They're still moving product. They're not. Remember, dealers no longer seem to be playing so much the volume game. they realized that they had to rework how they did business back in those last 2 years. So they found ways to add margin and not have to sell as many products. And that's what they're relying on. And they're carrying that philosophy all the way through still to this day. It's reported that car makers have actually dropped their production rate down about 8 million units during that pandemic, if we will. And unfortunately, during that time, that people just got used to the idea of, stretching their opportunities, maybe using rental cars or catching public transportation. But now most people, a lot of those folks that were actually working from home are having to get back into the car market and having to get back in there, back on the saddle, buying that new car, buying that used car, because a lot of their bosses are kicking their butts back to work and saying, hey, we need you back in the office. So this is what's starting to happen now. This backlog, where back during those last couple of years it wasn't that dire, but now people are moving again and people are shaking, and we need that inventory. And unfortunately, the supply and demand is ugly, and so of course the supply is low, the demand is high, prices are stable, and they're holding, and in some cases still climbing. So the new car market clearly is one has seen a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of it has to do with specific models. Again, hybrids seem to be popular while electric seems to be suffering now, of course, with Tesla, and they're slicing a lot of their prices lately. In the last several months to last year and a half, they've been chopping almost quarterly drastic chops off their new car pricing, leaving the used vehicles that were only 6 months old upside down on loans and mortgages and all of that. So unfortunately, even a lot of those brands are starting to feel the burn. But new cars or used cars, which is the better way to go? So there's another little phenomenon. It depends where your budget sits. So new or used. So what they're saying is, if you're looking for the lower price point cars up to about $10,000 in value in US funds, you only have about 30 days of inventory, basically internationally or nationally, if you will. But if you're looking for something that's over $35,000, you're actually at a place where the day supply is about 58. So clearly, the more you spend, as you move up closer to the luxury car segment, the full-size SUVs, the premium luxury exotics, those vehicles are going to sit longer and longer and longer, and it's almost indirectly proportional to the value of the vehicle. So what we're finding, or directly proportional, if you will, whereas if you go with a dirt cheap car, the cars that people need for basic transportation, there's a much shorter time frame. In other words, you get on the lot, there's a lot, that car's gone. You get a cheap little, say for example, Toyota Corolla, it doesn't sit there very long, it's gone. Little Mazda 3, boom, it's gone. On the used market, they're getting snatched up very, very quickly. So used cars are hard to come by. Now, new cars as well, certain manufacturers, Toyota, just in time, you gotta wait. I already mentioned Honda, a lot of them you have to wait for a while too, and Mazdas. You can find some of those vehicles on the lot, but a lot of them are hard to come by. So there's other conversations around this. Overpaying for a used vehicle that might be 2 years old with 60,000 or, say 80,000 kilometers, or say 40, 50,000 miles on it. And these dealers, for example, Toyota, are actually charging as much for a 2-year-old Camry with 50,000 miles on it as you can get a brand new one if you walked right into the dealer and just waited for 4 months. This is what's starting to happen in this marketplace. So the concept of buying a used car is not at its finest right now. And as I said, the wholesale market in used seems to be stable and seems, if anything, to be trending upwards. So the idea of buying a used car right now just doesn't make a ton of sense in most cases. Now, buying new, in many cases, it makes more sense. Other than the fact that with Toyotas and Hondas having to wait a year and a half, that may not always be practical. But for vehicles, maybe you opt out for the gas versions rather than the hybrid. Maybe you can get that vehicle in 3 or 4 months instead. We also can't forget UAW. By the time they settle that, we may be in a place where the electrified market has come so fast and furious. Behind that, there may be less and less and less of a market for these full-size gas jobbers. So we're going to be in a really awkward position once UAW all settles out. The electrified market is pushing hard. Tesla and the Cybertruck's pushing hard, and all these other manufacturers are really pushing, and they have to meet deadlines, 2025, 2030, 2035. So right on the heels of the big three, that's going to put this whole game into a new territory. So which is the better way to go? Well, we already kind of said it. You're buying a used vehicle right now. Often you're going to have to get, if it's a decent vehicle, you're going to often pay as much or more for a late model used vehicle with some miles and some stone chips on it as you would for a brand new one. The downside is you're going to have to wait. The other side of this coin is the conversation about economics. A lot of times subprime lenders or borrowers are going to find themselves struggling to get decent rates on used models, used vehicles, and they might have better opportunities to get more incentives on new vehicles. For example, car lots like the Dodge, I already mentioned, Stellantis, Ram, Ford, Chevy, Jeeps, the brands right now that are clearly overpriced, but nonetheless, brands that have a lot of inventory right now, supply and demand, remember, are more likely to provide more incentives. And you might have a better opportunity to gathering some of those incentives and to buy a vehicle that makes a little more sense financially. Now, don't want to be upside down on your loan. Where's the trending of these markets? We'll see, time will tell. But clearly to me right now, why, just ask yourself the simple question, why would most people buy a used vehicle that's been beat up and tattered and seen some road miles and pay the same as a new one? Well, there's very few reasons why you would buy used over new right now. Simple fact is, what it used to be, where you used to buy a 3-year-old vehicle, used to be about 40% of the value of a new. They used to say you'd lose 20% by driving it off the lot. Those days are gone. And now, as long as these wholesale markets for used are holding stable, we're finding it absolutely obnoxiously silly to go out and really buy a used vehicle right now. If your credit score is high enough and you can actually afford the price of that new vehicle, you're definitely better off going that route. Now, with that said, the price of new vehicles are so high too, so there clearly are some budget constraints and limitations for people maybe just looking for that cheap car. And if that's all you want, and you want that 7-year-old, very well used, Toyota Honda with 120,000 miles on it, it's got a few marks and patina on it, that's okay, as long as the numbers make sense. Remember, the old days, about 5 years in, that vehicle would be worth about 50% of its original value. That's really not the storyline anymore. So if you're asking me, which is the better way to go if your budget can tolerate and stomach it, the new cars at this time are the way to go. Just look for incentives, shop around for your best pricing on your lens and your loans. And back in the day, I would always tell you a 2 or 3-year-old used vehicle was always the sweet spot. That's just not the case anymore. That's the money spot for a lot of the dealers, and they know it, and they're going to take advantage of the buyer.